Welcome to this limited series podcast, The Cost of Sex. In our last episode, Dangerous Sex, we looked at why some women entered and stayed in the commercial sex industry during and after the Sri Lankan Civil War. In this episode, Blind Justice, we delve into how sex work is viewed within the law and how sex workers are able to access justice if they wish to do so. We talk about the experiences of 3 women and talk to Ambika Satkunanathan, a former member of the Human Rights Commission, to help us understand the ambiguity and the harshness of the laws that govern sex work. Ambika, is sex work illegal?
Sex work in Sri Lanka is not illegal. But we could say that it is criminalized in practice. What do I mean by this? So in law, there are certain offenses. If you commit them, then you will be punished. Sex work is not such an offense. But in practice, what has happened is that the police use other laws, such as the Vagrants Ordinance, to criminalize women who engage in sex work. So they're using other laws to arrest them, and then they might be produced before a magistrate who will fine them under the Vagrants Ordinance, or the police might, we have seen in practice, they ask for sexual bribes, after which they will release the person. Sometimes the magistrate, when they're produced before them, orders that they be sent for testing, to test whether they have STIs, in which case they might be remanded for up to 2 weeks in prison while they do the test, which of course is done without their consent, until the results come. And if the results are okay, then the person is released after a fine is imposed. So technically it is, and legally it is not an offense, but there are other laws being used to criminalize persons who engage in sex work. Now, in Sri Lanka, we also had the courts. Even the Supreme Court they've had judgments which say that sex work is not a criminal offense. So we have laws that say, for instance, living off the proceeds of what they call it prostitution. Living off the proceeds of prostitution is an offense. We have a law called the Brothels Ordinance, where a person running a brothel can be arrested, and that is a criminal offense. So these laws are used to criminalize persons engaging in sex work, but the courts themselves have said that sex work itself is not a criminal offense. So it is not illegal. In addition, what happens is that transgender persons who engage in sex work, they have an additional legal barrier or another law, that is another provision of the law which is used against them. That is called impersonation. So you're impersonating someone else. They use that in addition to the Brothels Ordinance, the Vagrants Ordinance, to target and arrest trans persons.
The story you are about to hear is of a Sinhala mother of 3 in her late 50s from Anuradhapura. She has been a sex worker for over 3 decades and has experienced extreme violence and sexual impunity during the conflict. We join her story when she's speaking about a terrible experience that she had and why she didn't access justice for it.
I came into this after that. I have done this now for 35 or so years. I have met other women in this trade. With them, I have gone everywhere: Colombo, Polonnaruwa, Madavachiya, Jaffna. I work there for a few weeks and come back to Anuradhapura. I stand at the bus stand as if waiting for a bus. Many deals in Anuradhapura is with the army. Individuals solicit women for themselves through guest houses. But because we work on the street, we get caught to their harassment and gang rapes. They call us to be with them. They take us to their barracks, into their friends' houses. Sometimes 2 or 3 of them sleep with us. Sometimes they take advantage of us. Around 2017, some people kidnapped me. They fed us, but they used us for their needs. They let us go after a week. So I didn't bother going to the police. Because when a sex worker goes to the police, they tell us, oh, they took you because you are a prostitute. So when something like this happens to us, we bear it because the police harass us.
This story reminds us that sexual violence against women during the war is complicated by their status as sex workers. If a Sinhala woman feels that she has no access to justice, then is the situation even more difficult for minority women and trans women to access justice?
In Sri Lanka, impunity is widespread. You have impunity for general human rights violations and generally even violence, sexual and gender-based violence against women. So if you are a sex worker and you happen to be from, let's say, one of the Tamil community or the Muslim community, which is already marginalized and discriminated against, it means you have several layers of marginalization and discrimination that you have to overcome to even to seek justice, not to obtain it, even to seek it, which means to go to the police station. Where sexual and gender-based violence is during conflict is concerned, generally the violations during conflict are not acknowledged by the Sri Lankan state and by successive governments. Particularly where sexual and gender-based violence is concerned, there is also reluctance to come forward because of the stigma and the shame. The women in the conflict-affected areas, those societies, it's also they feel by complaining about it or going public, they bring shame to the community. So there is that element of the community is already under siege and we will then be bringing disrepute to the community. So there are many layers of inequality that women who engage in sex work, who have been subjected to sexual violence during conflict, have to navigate to find any form of justice. Then our systems that we have, if we take the police, we take the criminal justice system, even if these women lodge a complaint at the police, it won't be taken seriously because even generally women lodging complaints about domestic violence, for instance, are not taken seriously. So imagine if a sex worker goes to the police station to complain about sexual violence, the person is likely to be subject to further abuse. They might ask for sexual bribes, violence, etc. It is also because sex work itself is stigmatized and they believe that persons engaging in sex work are not equal citizens, that they are not deserving of dignity, and violence against them is normalized, which is why when they go to the police or when they seek the assistance of the criminal justice system, they will be subject to further discrimination, further violence, abuse, and marginalization. So the system is against them because the system is patriarchal, right? And the system also is discriminatory against certain ethnic and social groups. So sex workers who hail from these communities are one of the most marginalized groups in society.
This is the story of a Sinhala transgender woman from the outskirts of Colombo. She's in the process of transitioning and as such does not possess a gender recognition certificate. But because society and even her family has discarded her, she has found community with the trans and non-trans women sex workers. They live together and help each other with clients, with support when arrested, and with emotional strength. Since of late, she has been looking after a motherless child and considers herself a mother. We pick up her story as she talks about how the law affected her, especially during the war, which offered her no protection from sexual bribery, harassment, and physical violence.
They charge us stating that we have been masking as women at night during the war and acting suspiciously. I don't know where transgender people are supposed to be put, but so far, whoever has been caught has been put in prison with males. After we are put in prison, what happens to us is very scary. We are very afraid. We go through checkpoints. Because let's say, for instance, I must go from where I am to Negombo, and there are barracks here and there. If I go from the Katunayaka side, I can't go through the airport and I can't go through a field. So finally, I will go through a checkpoint. When we go, they ask us where we are going. And we say that we are going to earn some money. Then they would ask us to support them. We say that we don't have money right now, but on the way back, we can give them. And they say, who needs money? They have sex with around 3 to 4 of us and let us go. At the next barrack, they won't let us pass. So we dance for them. We would have sex inside their barracks. There would be barrels everywhere, so we weren't visible at night. So we would have to bend our bodies and have sex with them. There weren't a lot of people, it was just us at night. They have some fun out of it. What are we supposed to do? The officers would drum on the barracks and tell us to dance and sing a song. What we wanted was to somehow be able to pass the checkpoints. We feel a little hate then. After all, they are having sex with us and not even paying. But what are we to do? We must manage the situation. So, while the devil drummed, we danced. We find a spot to do sex work and then earn some money. We hire a vehicle to get back. They stop that as well. We say that we are going home after finishing work and they let us go.
Her story highlights how challenging sex work can be when it comes to finding some equality under the law. Ambika, what complicated this legal environment around sex work, especially when it comes to sexual violence and impunity during times of war?
Because the perception is that sex work is a criminal offense, that makes it difficult for these persons to approach the criminal justice system to seek any form of redress. For instance, it's like LGBTIQ persons who are subject to violence. Because it is criminalized in Sri Lanka, they are afraid to seek the assistance of the criminal justice system. Same applies here. In addition to that, there's an additional layer, which is what I said before also, that they believe that these are not persons. It's not equal persons. They're not deserving of dignity. They're not deserving of rights. And it means that whatever you do to these persons, they are deserving of that violence and abuse. And that attitude is normalized, is entrenched within the structures, the systems, the processes, and society. Which is why, for them, these particular group of people, it'll be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to find any form of redress for the violence they've experienced. Generally, what we see in Sri Lanka is that because impunity is widespread, amongst all citizens, the faith in public institutions is extremely low. And the relationship between the citizen and the state is fractured. And there is no relationship of trust, particularly between Tamil and Muslim citizens or LGBTIQ citizens and the state, because these are people who've been subject to continuous discrimination, violence, and abuse. They find that the state, which is the duty bearer, we say, it has the duty to protect rights, is the one that is the perpetrator. So therefore, these women would not have any faith because they know the police are abusive. They arrest them. They subject them to violence. So they will not seek the assistance of these structures and system because they have no faith in them. The other is that these women, probably because of socialization, because of the abuse, and community has told them you're not deserving of it, they themselves might think, well, this is normal, this is okay, I'm a bad person, or because I do this, I deserve this sort of violence. Therefore, to tackle this problem, we need to address it at multiple levels.
I suppose this is why without decriminalization, many women don't feel that they have the moral right to come forward to ask for accountability for what happened to them during the conflict. Of course, in a hierarchy of needs after the war, for many sex workers, justice is not an immediate priority because they are struggling to feed their families or find some stability in their lives. But the next story is a story of a woman from Jaffna. Her childhood of displacement during the war shows the suffering of refugee women and children who are vulnerable to abuse with no witness. But she echoes the sentiments of many of the women interviewed, that they do want some justice for the pain that they have endured. It might not give them healing or even a sense of peace, but it might be the start of feeling that they matter.
After that, my father dragged all of us and ran. When we were running, somebody got hold of my hand and pulled. My mother shouted and they beat her. All this happened at once. Scared, I didn't know what to do. At that time, everything was burned. They chased us, they beat my father, and destroyed everything. After that, my father left us and we went from place to place. Even today, we don't know where my father is. After that, it's just me, my younger sister, and mother only. After this, we went all over. We went from village to village, just roamed around. During the war, we went and stayed in a camp. It is in that camp that the army raped me. 4 of them took me. They lied to me and took me away. At that time, I was 17 or 18 years old. Didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. I wanted to die that day itself. But I couldn't leave my mother and sister and die. We were in the camp a long time, about 6 to 7 months. Those 6 months, it happened again and again. I got used to it. What else to do? I did it for them to eat. My mother was also mentally upset thinking about my father. Because of that also, I lost my sense of shame. I couldn't do anything else. My younger sister was small. What to do? The army was unjust and raped me. So like that, I fell into this work. I had no choice. I don't know what to say except to say with my heart. I didn't go willingly to this job. We suffered so much then and are suffering now because of it. I have suffered a lot, cried a lot. They have treated me so cruelly. I don't know how to say it. Why do they do this? They should help, but they don't help. Instead, they do like this. For doing this, the law must punish them. Now, how can I say who did this? There is no way. Whatever happened has happened now. I don't know who they were. I feel courageous sometimes, but still I can't do anything about it. We have become powerless.
Ambika, what are the existing avenues for them to access justice for what they have endured during the war?
I think generally there's a lot that can be and should be done. Society should, civil society first also need to work to create awareness within society about to undo these to dismantle these stereotypes, to counter the prejudices that are deeply ingrained within society where sex workers are concerned. Society themselves must look at sex workers as equal citizens who have equal entitlements and deserving, and they have a right to dignity. That is extremely important. Where the state is concerned, of course, repealing outdated laws like the Vagrants Ordinance. We need to ensure that the police, and this is something, the dysfunctional, violent, abusive, corrupt nature of the police is something that is deeply entrenched because it's existed for decades. So how do we even begin to tackle that? Firstly, it needs to start from the top. We need the government itself, which is whether it's a president, prime minister, ministers, for them to respect the rule of law, for them not to use the police for their own purposes, for them to have zero tolerance of torture and violence. And of course, where the legal community is concerned, we see prejudices there as well about not being, not willing to represent. We don't have enough pro bono assistance. Now, for instance, we have a legal aid commission, but that doesn't provide legal assistance for criminal offenses. And can you imagine a sex worker approaching the Legal Aid Commission? What kind of treatment would they get? They would not be treated with dignity, probably would be sent away. So the legal community and the criminal justice system also, the legal community, more pro bono work, step up to assist these persons. The criminal justice system, it's also about raising awareness amongst judges, and to ensure that during the criminal justice process, which is very patriarchal and sexist and even misogynist in a way, the process itself, we need to change that. Because in Sri Lanka, we have formal processes that give protection, but we have unseen, invisible, informal processes that take precedence over the formal processes or the legal processes, and those tend to be discriminatory and abusive. So I think every sector in society, the state, the criminal justice system, judges, lawyers, society, civil society, have a role to play to ensure that these women are treated with the dignity that they are entitled to and are able to enjoy the rights to which they're entitled to. In other countries, they ask for decriminalization. In Sri Lanka, it is not legally criminalized. It is not an offense. But we need to decriminalize our psyches. We need to decriminalize our practices so that what happens in reality is in line with what exists in law, which is that this is not a criminal offense.
What is clear is that the vulnerabilities that they endure within a space that criminalizes their work also prevents them from the peace of mind of having a safe space to work without society's condemnation. And without ever being able to access justice for conflict-related sexual violence they have endured in one way or another, there is no peace. If so, 3 things matter going forward. Firstly, creating the space for sex workers to share their experiences with us, their public, so that we are more aware of their struggles and that behind every sex worker is a real person. Secondly, networking and strengthening sex workers to support each other and to make their needs be heard, especially when it comes to justice. And finally, to seek justice, to tell their truth without punishment, and to work with peace of mind and personal safety is guaranteed. Thank you for joining us for this episode, Blind Justice, of the limited series podcast, The Cost of Sex. I'd like to thank Ambika Satkunanathan for joining us. In the next episode, Safety Nets, Pabha Deshapriya focuses on sex work, motherhood, and family.